One seed, one season, and food for a lifetime. That's what the elders of the Hopi promised. In 1998, scientists tested those same seeds under drought, and the plants thrived when wheat collapsed. So why do modern farms ignore the crops that fed entire civilizations for centuries? Let's uncover the story buried under our soil. Number 7. Amaranth. A handful of tiny seeds once fed whole empires. Centuries later, those same seeds break through cracks in concrete, still alive, still fighting for sunlight. Amaranth. The forever grain. The Aztecs called it huautli, and the Hopi named it catsina. Archaeologists uncovered ancient stores of it in the Tehuacan Valley of Mexico, dating back around 7,000 years. That discovery changed what we knew about farming history. Long before wheat reached the Americas, this red-stalked plant was already sustaining millions. It grows fast, thrives in poor soil, and yields up to 200,000 seeds per plant. It served as food, medicine, and symbol. Aztec festivals celebrated it through sacred figures made from amaranth dough and honey. Families shared pieces of these figures during ceremonies, nourishment, and faith combined. When Spanish friars arrived in 1521, they saw those rituals as defiance. They outlawed the crop, burned entire fields, and forced people to replace it with European wheat. But the seeds survived. Families in Puebla hid them inside clay jars and replanted them in secret gardens for generations. Modern scientists rediscovered it in 1972 when researchers at the University of Nebraska tested old seed samples. The plants grew faster than corn and tolerated drought better than most modern grains. By 1985, NASA had listed amaranth as a space crop because of its nutritional density. Each seed carries 16 to 18% protein, far above wheat's 10 to 12%, plus high levels of calcium, iron, and lysine, nutrients rare in plants. However, while corporations now market it as a superfood, indigenous farmers still earn very little from it. Their legacy built the foundation for this rediscovery. Amaranth reseeds itself naturally once established. You plant it once, and it keeps returning every year, feeding both soil and people. And from these crimson fields, another crop rises, bright yellow, oil-rich, and worshipped across river valleys for its resilience and light. Number 6. Sunflower. By 2500 BCE, tribes along the Mississippi River were already farming a bright yellow plant that followed the sun. That same plant now stands in billions across the world, but few remember where it began, in the gardens of indigenous women who saved its seeds like gold. The sunflower grew first in the American heartland. Archaeologists found early domesticated seeds in central Tennessee and Arkansas, showing that native farmers cultivated it over 4,500 years ago, centuries before maize reached the region. The tribes valued it for oil, medicine, and its ability to store energy through long winters. The seeds fed hunters during migration and served as offerings during seasonal ceremonies. When Spanish explorers entered the Mississippi Valley in the 1500s, they called it the flower that watches the sky. They shipped seeds back to Europe, where it became a decorative garden plant before its true purpose was rediscovered. By the 18th century, Russian farmers had turned the native sunflower into a commercial oil crop. Within 100 years, that oil fueled industries and households across Europe. Yet its birthplace, the lands between the Great Lakes and the Gulf, rarely got credit. Therefore, this humble flower carried two stories, one of survival, another of silent theft. It could grow in poor soil, endure heat, and reseed itself every year. A single mature head produced up to 2,000 edible seeds packed with vitamins, protein, and healthy fats. Indigenous women in the Mandan and Hidatsa tribes mixed it with dried berries and beans to create high-energy food long before modern trail mixes existed. So, the sunflower became more than decoration. It became sustenance that lit two continents. And just beneath that same soil, another forgotten native crop spread its roots deeper, returning every season without help from human hands. Number 5. Sunchoke, Jerusalem artichoke. In 1605, French explorers in Canada wrote about a strange root grown by native tribes along the St. Lawrence River. They called it a sunroot that tastes like chestnut. That root was the sunchoke, a crop so tough it spread across North America long before European crops ever took hold. The sunchoke belongs to the sunflower family, though it grows underground. Its knobby, tan roots store energy through winter, re-emerging every spring without planting. The tribes of the plains and Great Lakes relied on it as both food and trade. The Pawnee roasted it over open fires. The Dakota boiled it into thick soups during harsh winters. The plant thrived in sandy soil where corn struggled, giving families a safety net against crop failure. By the early 1600s, explorers carried sunchokes to Europe. In France, it became known as the Jerusalem artichoke, a mistranslation of the Italian word girasole, meaning turns toward the sun. The name stuck even though the plant had nothing to do with Jerusalem or artichokes. By 1623, it was already being grown in England and Italy as a delicacy, praised for its sweetness. However, by the 1700s, it lost favor among the wealthy because it grew too easily. The upper class dismissed it as peasant food, while indigenous people quietly kept cultivating it for survival. A single sunchoke plant can yield 3 to 6 pounds of edible roots, and once planted, it spreads on its own. Modern gardeners sometimes call it invasive. Native farmers once called it reliable. Its natural return each year meant constant food with almost no labor. Therefore, this root earned a reputation as the lazy farmer's miracle. You plant it once, and it keeps coming back forever. And through that same connection to water and renewal, another crop thrived, one that swayed gently in northern lakes and carried spiritual weight far beyond its grains. Number 4. Wild rice. In the Great Lakes region, the lakes used to shimmer with something more than sunlight. Thousands of tall green stalks rose from the shallows each summer, bending under the weight of black, ripened seeds. Wild rice, known to the Ojibwe as manumin, the good seed. Wild rice isn't true rice. It's an aquatic grass native to North America, growing naturally across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and parts of Canada. Archaeologists found traces of it in cooking pots from 1000 BCE, showing that tribes have harvested it for over 3,000 years. To the Ojibwe and Menominee people, it wasn't just food, it was destiny. Their migration stories told them to move west until they found the food that grows on water. When they reached Lake Superior, they knew they'd found home. Every fall, families paddled canoes through the rice beds. They gently knocked the grains into the boat with cedar sticks, leaving enough to reseed for next year. It was food and ceremony blended together. A good season could yield 500 pounds of rice per family, enough to last through winter. Traders once paid more for a pound of wild rice than for a pound of beaver fur. However, modern agriculture tried to domesticate it. In the 1950s, companies in Minnesota began cultivating paddy rice in flooded fields, replacing traditional harvests with machines. Within decades, corporations controlled most of the supply. The real wild rice, the kind that reseeds naturally in lakes, became rare and politically contested. In 2018, the Ojibwe passed tribal laws recognizing manumin as a living relative with legal rights to exist and flourish. Therefore, this grain still grows wild, free, and self-renewing, feeding generations without a single plow. And from these waters to dry land, another crop climbs high each year, linking food, soil, and survival through something older than farming itself. Number 3. Beans. Archaeologists tracing food remains in Mexico's Tehuacan Valley found bean fragments carbon dated to around 7000 BCE. That means people were growing beans before the Great Pyramids even existed. It's one of the oldest crops in the Americas, and still one of the smartest. Beans shaped indigenous agriculture long before modern science understood why. The Iroquois, Cherokee, and Pueblo called them the Three Sisters Helper because they worked in partnership with corn and squash. Beans climbed tall corn stalks for support while returning nitrogen to the soil through their roots, keeping the ground fertile. Therefore, farmers could grow the same field for years without chemicals or fallow cycles. Nature already had the system figured out. Historical records show that when Europeans arrived, there were over 50 distinct native bean varieties across North America: black turtle beans, tepary beans, scarlet runners, and pinto. Each was adapted to its land. Some resisted drought, others grew in mountain shade. The Hopi grew tepary beans that survived on rainfall alone. In the arid Southwest, that meant the difference between feast and famine. When Spanish settlers spread wheat and barley across the continent, indigenous communities kept planting beans quietly. They traded them from Canada to Chile. By the 1600s, beans had already spread through European diets, carried back by traders who saw their value. But few understood that those tiny seeds carried centuries of ecological knowledge. A single pole bean plant can climb 10 feet and produce for months. Once established, heirloom varieties reseed themselves if left to dry on the vine. Nutritionally, they remain unmatched, rich in protein, fiber, magnesium, and folate, everything a body needs to survive long winters. So beans didn't just sustain fields, they sustained cultures. And from the ground they enriched, another plant sprawled wide and golden, guarding the soil and storing sunlight through the coldest months of the year. Number 2. Squash. Archaeologists discovered squash seeds preserved in a cave near Oaxaca, Mexico, dating back over 10,000 years. That makes it one of the first plants humans ever domesticated. Older than corn, older than beans, older than nearly every staple we eat today. Squash wasn't just food, it was life insurance. Native farmers across the Americas planted it alongside corn and beans, the famous Three Sisters. Its broad leaves shaded the soil, trapping moisture and blocking weeds. The vines crawled across the ground like living armor, protecting the crops around them. The fruits stored easily through winter, giving families calories when nothing else grew. By 5000 BCE, squash varieties stretched from Central America to the Great Lakes. Tribes like the Iroquois, Mandan, and Hopi grew dozens of types, some small and tender, others huge and hard-shelled. The Zuni carved dried gourds into water containers. The Cherokee roasted strips of sweet orange flesh as travel food. When European explorers arrived, they were stunned by the variety. Spanish chroniclers in the 1500s recorded fields of gold and green fruits beyond counting. Squash also taught early farmers a hidden lesson. Genetics matter. Cross-pollination between wild and cultivated plants created endless new shapes and colors. The ancestors of modern pumpkins, zucchinis, and butternuts all trace back to these early native varieties. A single vine could produce 20 pounds of food with almost no maintenance. Some heirloom types, like the Hubbard and Cushaw, still grow today from original native seed lines. However, as industrial farming spread, most of those varieties disappeared. Out of hundreds once known, only a handful remain in common use. Yet, in indigenous seed banks across North America, the ancient DNA of those plants sleeps in jars, waiting for soil again. And from these same fields of memory, the tallest sister still stands, a golden plant that changed the hemisphere and became the foundation of nations. Number 1. Maize. Around 9,000 years ago, in the Balsas River Valley of southern Mexico, farmers took a wild grass called teosinte and began selecting its fattest kernels. Over generations, they turned a fragile weed into maize, the crop that would build cities, shape trade routes, and feed civilizations from the Andes to the Great Lakes. Those early farmers engineered something revolutionary. teosinte had tiny, hard seeds locked in tough shells. Through selective breeding, indigenous growers coaxed the plant to grow larger ears and softer kernels. By 4000 BCE, they had created a stable food source that could survive poor soil and harsh weather. It was science born through observation, patience, and necessity. Maize quickly became the heartbeat of the Americas. The Maya, Olmec, and Aztec built entire calendars around its life cycle. The Hopi called it Mother Corn. Every color, red, yellow, blue, black, white, held meaning. In the Inca Empire, maize fueled armies and ceremonies. It traveled north through trade networks until nearly every native community had their own adapted variety. There were thousands of them, short drought types in the desert, tall sweet kinds near the Mississippi, and flint corn bred for cold in the Northeast. By the time Europeans arrived in 1492, maize already fed hundreds of nations. They carried it home, where it transformed global agriculture. Within 50 years, corn was growing across Europe, Africa, and Asia. It became so essential that entire economies shifted around it. But the crop's roots remained indigenous, born from centuries of quiet innovation. Therefore, maize is more than a grain. It's a blueprint for endurance. A single seed can grow a plant taller than a person, yielding hundreds of kernels ready to replant. Families who save true seed can keep it alive for generations. And yet, in the modern age, something in that legacy has been rewritten, a quiet genetic shift that changed what we eat and who controls it. The seeds that fed empires are growing again, stronger than ever.